Welcome, everyone, to vpod.ai. I'm your host, Mike, and joining me today is our guest, Susan. You can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, visit vpod.ai to get started today. So to kick things off today, I want you to imagine two founders. Both of them are just relentlessly ambitious.
Right, the classic startup archetype.
Exactly. They both work 90-hour weeks, sleep under their desks, eat instant ramen for every single meal. And they both engineered a truly brilliant product. Fast forward 5 years.
Let me guess, one is wildly successful and the other isn't.
Yeah, spot on. One is ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, hailed as a visionary genius on the cover of Forbes. And the other is quietly filing for bankruptcy, moving their belongings into a storage unit.
Wow, it's a stark contrast.
It is. And our culture desperately wants you to believe the difference between those two outcomes was just raw grit. We practically worship this idea that sheer willpower conquers the free market. But, well, looking at the stack of economic research, venture capital data, and demographic surveys sitting on the desk between us today, a much darker reality emerges.
Right, because the difference wasn't grit, it was likely just their parents' zip code.
Yep. So today our mission is to basically take a sledgehammer to the most sacred, universally beloved startup narrative out there, the whole rags to riches bootstrap myth.
And it really is a myth that requires dismantling because, it does so much heavy lifting in our culture. The bootstrap narrative is incredibly flattering to people who win,
Oh, absolutely.
It takes their financial outcome and retroactively turns it into this undeniable proof of their moral character. But more dangerously, it flatters the rest of society by reinforcing this comforting illusion that the market is a perfectly fair meritocracy.
Right. It tells you that if you just endure enough pain and, put in enough sweat, success is guaranteed, which fundamentally conflates a financial strategy with a moral ranking system.
That's the exact issue.
Because we all know the functional definition of bootstrapping, right? You preserve your ownership stake, you run incredibly lean, you rely on customer revenue instead of venture capital cash.
Right. And as a financial tactic, it's brilliant.
Yeah. It forces you to actually build something people want to buy. The problem isn't the financial mechanism itself. The problem is how that mechanism has been weaponized into a purity test.
You're touching on the exact mechanism of the myth there. Because bootstrapping as a cash flow strategy is sound business. But the toxic transformation happens when the phrase, "I built this without outside money," is quietly translated by the culture into, "I built this without help." And those are two completely different realities.
Because help doesn't always look like a giant cardboard check from a venture capitalist.
Far from it. And if we want to see how much help is actually required to survive in the modern business ecosystem, we just need to look at what happens when founders who don't fit the traditional mold actually ask for capital.
Right. The numbers tell the real story.
Exactly. I brought the Crunchbase data published in February of 2025, which analyzes the previous year. So in all of 2024, startups with a Black founder or co-founder received $730 million in total funding.
Okay, wait. To an individual listening to us right now, $730 million sounds like a massive fortune.
Sure, it sounds huge in a vacuum.
But in the context of the entire global startup ecosystem, it's practically microscopic.
It represents 0.4%, just 0.4% of all startup funding.
Wow. Just 0.4%.
Yeah. In a capital market that constantly markets itself as this obsessive, hyper-efficient machine hunting for overlooked talent, a number like 0.4% isn't just a rounding error. It is a glaring diagnostic of a system that is functioning in direct opposition to its own mythology.
It makes me think of a marathon. The way we applaud bootstrapping, it's like we are loudly praising a runner for winning the race barefoot, just marveling at their raw tolerance for pain.
Right.
But we are completely ignoring the fact that they were given a 20-mile head start on a paved downhill road.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the other runners were forced to start at the actual starting line, running barefoot through knee-deep mud, carrying a 50-pound backpack.
I love that. That visual captures the nuance perfectly. Because the effort is still real. The barefoot runner with the head start still had to run those last 6 miles.
Right, they didn't just teleport to the finish line.
Exactly. They still sweat. They still felt the burn in their lungs. Privileged founders do work incredibly hard, and they make massive personal sacrifices. The illusion isn't that they didn't work. The illusion is that privilege operates by making the support systems entirely invisible to the observer and, honestly, often to the founders themselves.
Which opens up this fascinating concept from the research called the invisible balance sheet.
Yes, exactly.
If sheer hard work and a good product don't explain that massive 0.4% funding gap, we have to look at the hidden assets that make grit look entirely self-made. Let's make this tangible for everyone listening. What does that invisible help actually look like on a random Tuesday afternoon for a struggling founder?
Well, it looks mundane, you know. It looks like a spouse who has a stable corporate job with comprehensive health insurance.
Oh, that's huge.
Right. Which means you can afford to quit your job without risking your family's medical care. Or it looks like parents who paid for your college tuition, meaning you don't have a $1,000 student loan payment devouring your early cash flow every single month.
Yeah, or having a family home with an empty guest room where you can live rent-free for 2 years while you build your prototype.
Exactly. It's the safety net covering the downside of failure.
Right. If you know that your company going to zero just means you move back into your childhood bedroom, rather than ending up evicted and homeless, your relationship with risk is fundamentally different. You can afford to be bold.
You really can. Privilege basically takes family wealth and converts it into courage.
Wow, that's a great way to put it.
And it takes elite social networks and converts them into hustle, like a warm introduction from a former college roommate who now works at a venture fund. That is an off-balance sheet asset.
Absolutely.
And when we look at the macroeconomic data on wealth disparities, the invisible balance sheet becomes glaringly visible.
Yeah, I was looking at the 2024 analysis from Brookings on this exact point. They put hard numbers on that safety net. The median white household wealth is roughly $285,000.
Right.
Compare that to black households, which sit at about $45,000, and Hispanic households at $62,000.
And we have to layer the Federal Reserve's survey data on top of that, which that came out in 2023 based on 2022 numbers.
Yeah.
It consistently shows that the typical white family holds about 6 times the wealth of a black family and about 5 times that of a Hispanic family.
Which is just a staggering gap.
And it isn't a recent fluctuation either. The National Community Reinvestment Coalition published an analysis in 2024 showing that the 85% median wealth gap between black and white households has been stubbornly, deeply persistent from 1992 all the way to 2022.
It's just frozen.
Yeah.
It's a frozen statistic.
Let's put those numbers into perspective for you. It's like trying to hold your breath underwater. A median wealth of $285,000 is a scuba tank.
Yes.
It buys you time to figure things out, to pivot a failing product, to wait for a market to mature. A net wealth of $45,000 means you have to surface immediately or you drown. You literally cannot afford the time it takes to succeed.
You just don't have the runway.
Exactly. It reminds me of that quote inspired by Martin Luther King, where he pointed out the cruel absurdity of telling a bootless man to lift himself up by his bootstraps. Agency without tools isn't motivational. It's pointing at someone without a ladder and telling them to climb harder.
It is pure theater. But, and this is important, it's a theater that serves a very specific economic function.
Well, this isn't just about passive personal wealth gaps. It's about how the venture capital ecosystem actively weaponizes those gaps.
Weaponizes them. That's a strong word.
But it's true. The startup world operates as a highly structured selection machine, and the way it filters out the bootless founders is masked in incredibly neutral, pragmatic-sounding business advice.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Because I've heard VCs give this advice on panels 100 times. They tell early-stage founders, be scrappy, do more with less, go build your prototype, and come back when you have traction.
Yes, exactly that phrase.
And on the surface, that just sounds like prudent business, right?
Mm.
Show me people want this before I hand you $5 million. Are you saying that advice is actually a trap?
It is a structural trap hiding in plain sight. I mean, investors absolutely should care about discipline in validating market demand. But here's the mechanical flaw in that demand. Traction requires time. You have to write the code, beta test it, onboard early users, and iterate based on their feedback. Time requires savings. You still have to buy groceries and pay rent during those 8 months you are generating that traction.
So when an investor demands traction before they write a check, what they're actually imposing is a hidden capital requirement.
Exactly. The test looks perfectly equal, like everyone has to show 50,000 monthly active users to pass. But the cost of taking that test is radically unequal depending on your family's net worth.
That makes total sense. But let me play devil's advocate for a second here, because let's view this from the other side of the table. Early-stage venture capital is a high-risk, incredibly low-information environment, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Investors are evaluating unproven ideas, and statistically 9 out of 10 startups fail. Given that catastrophic failure rate, don't investors fundamentally need shortcuts?
Like what?
Like relying on things like pattern recognition and warm introductions just to survive the sheer overwhelming volume of pitches flooding their inboxes every day?
Well, it's a survival mechanism, yes. But we have to examine what happens when you rely on those specific shortcuts.
Okay, sure.
When trust primarily flows through existing closed networks of class, race, and elite educational institutions, pattern recognition stops being about identifying pure potential. It devolves into pattern replication.
Wow, so they aren't finding the best new ideas. They're just finding the people who look, speak, and format their pitch decks exactly like the people who brought them the best ideas 5 years ago.
Exactly. It becomes a machine for rediscovering the already recognized. And the data proves how stubborn these replication patterns are, even when the industry presses out PR campaigns claiming everything has changed.
Right, the PR is always about how inclusive things are getting.
Right. Take the PitchBook data from 2026, which analyzed venture funding throughout 2025. The big celebrated headline was that mixed-gender founding teams raised a record $73.6 billion, which captured 27.7% of all deal value.
Which, on a billboard, that looks like a massive victory for inclusion.
It provides fantastic cover, but when you dissect the methodology, that statistic includes companies with just a single woman on a founding team of 4 or 5 men.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. Meanwhile, funding for all female founding teams remains severely constrained, barely moving the needle. It's a masterclass in how inclusion can rise in the headline, while the actual concentration of power and capital remains locked in the details.
That's incredibly frustrating.
It is. The warm intro might seem like an efficient filter to a venture partner, but it heavily filters out anyone who isn't already inside the bubble.
Wait, so if investors are quietly testing founders on their ability to survive without a salary for a year and filtering deals through these homogenous networks, that means we aren't just filtering out bad ideas.
No, we aren't.
We are actively suffocating brilliant products simply because the founder couldn't pay November's rent. What is the macroeconomic fallout of this? Like, what do you, me, and everyone listening actually lose because of this selection machine?
The collateral damage falls into 3 main buckets: lost companies, distorted innovation, and profound psychological damage.
Okay, let's break those down.
The lost companies are exactly what you just described. Founders without a hidden balance sheet run out of childcare money or health insurance before they can hit the arbitrary traction metrics.
Right.
The experiment dies undercapitalized, and society never even gets to evaluate the product.
It's like running a greenhouse, but you only water the plants closest to the front door. And then when the plants in the back wither and die, you point to them and say, see, they just lack the biological will to grow.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and it leads directly into the second bucket: distorted innovation. Because capital inherently funds what capital recognizes. Problems that are near capital get funded with lightning speed.
Do you see this all the time? It feels like we are over-optimizing the world for the already served. We get 50 different AI-powered size platforms designed to make white-collar office workers 2% more efficient at sending calendar invites. But massive structural problems in society are completely ignored.
Exactly, because problems far from capital, like rural logistics, immigrant finance, maternal health, or elder care, they are frequently dismissed in boardrooms as niche markets.
Even though they affect millions of people.
Right, but the people writing the checks don't personally experience those pain points, so they don't perceive the market size. The recognition gap literally shapes the physical and digital infrastructure of our future.
That is terrifying.
And finally, we have the third bucket, which is the psychological damage to the founders who are trying to navigate this.
I would imagine that chronic scarcity entirely narrows a founder's imagination.
It shrinks their horizon to mere survival. When you are just trying to keep the lights on for another month, you make desperate decisions. You drastically underprice your products just to get immediate cash in the door. You skip essential legal protections. You delay hiring the key engineer you need. The bootstrap myth turns undercapitalization into an identity, convincing founders that asking for support means they lack discipline.
So you internalize a systemic failure as a personal character flaw.
Exactly.
You lay awake at night thinking, I'm just not working hard enough, I'm not gritty enough, when in reality, your competitors are coasting on $250,000 of family equity.
That psychological toll is immeasurable. And it forces us to look ahead and ask how this landscape is going to shift over the next decade, because the economics of starting a business are currently undergoing two massive tectonic shifts.
The most obvious one being artificial intelligence, I assume.
Yep.
Because on one hand, AI tools are making it incredibly cheap to bootstrap certain types of digital businesses. You can have an AI write your code, generate your marketing copy, and handle Tier 1 customer support at a fraction of what a human team cost 3 years ago.
For software and digital goods, the initial capital barrier to entry is genuinely dropping.
Right.
But the second shift is happening on the other side of the table. Venture capital firms are increasingly deploying AI to source and evaluate companies.
Oh, really?
Yes, they are using machine learning algorithms to scrape the internet, analyze founder backgrounds, scan emerging markets, and predict outcomes to find the next unicorn.
Okay, let me stop you there because my immediate instinct is that this might actually solve the problem.
How so?
Well, if an AI is doing the sourcing, doesn't that strip the human bias out of the equation? Like, a machine doesn't care what elite coastal college you went to. It doesn't care if you play golf at the right country club, and it can't be swayed by a warm introduction. It's just crunching the math, right?
You would think so, but the reality is far more insidious. Automation always inherits the assumptions of its training data.
Oh, of course.
If you train an algorithm on historical venture capital data that heavily favors founders from elite universities who fit a specific demographic profile and who had warm introductions, the AI will mathematically deduce that those specific traits are the definition of success.
Oh, wow. It's like trying to build a self-driving car, but you train its AI entirely on footage of people running red lights.
Exactly.
The machine doesn't know it's breaking the law. It thinks running the red light is the rule. So the AI in venture capital isn't removing the bias, it's just laundering it through math.
And it executes that bias faster, at scale, and with virtually zero visible accountability. Instead of a human partner visibly declining a pitch because they didn't connect with the founder, an algorithm silently filters that founder out of the pipeline before a human being ever even sees the pitch deck.
That's chilling.
The system looks perfectly neutral, but the exclusion is hard-coded.
So if private venture capital is on track to automate and scale its historical biases, where is the real scaling capital going to come from for founders who don't fit the mold?
It is going to rely heavily on public capital.
Public capital.
Yeah. When you look at the truly ambitious, world-altering companies being built over the next decade, in deep tech, energy transition, and advanced logistics, they won't scale on private venture capital alone.
Because it's too expensive.
Because it's too risky for them. They are going to rely on government contracts, tax credits, defense budgets, and clean energy incentives. The true future of scaling is public de-risking paired with heroic private storytelling.
Okay, so if we recognize that the system is functioning exactly as it was built to function, that means we can reprogram the inputs.
We can.
We've diagnosed the myth, we've mapped the invisible balance sheet, and we've exposed the selection machine. Now we need to talk about the cure. How do we actually fix the plumbing? How do we build a more honest ecosystem for you, the listener, whether you are a founder trying to get an idea off the ground, an investor writing checks, or just a citizen watching this economy operate?
Well, it requires all three of those groups to change their behavior. Let's start with the founders. The immediate first step is to stop romanticizing your own suffering.
Yes, please.
Exhaustion is not market validation. Destroying your physical health is not proof of a strong business model. Founders need to meticulously map their real capital stack.
Meaning they need to look beyond just the cash sitting in their corporate bank account.
Yes. Ask yourself, who is lending you credibility? Where are you securing non-dilutive capital, like state grants or prepaying enterprise customers? And crucially, successful founders have a duty to start telling honest origin stories.
Be transparent about the help you got.
Exactly. When a founder stands on a stage and says, I worked hard, but my spouse carried our health insurance and my parents covered rent for a year, they are not confessing a weakness.
Right.
They are highlighting the vital infrastructure that made their risks survivable. That kind of honesty creates a usable, realistic roadmap for the next generation.
It totally changes the narrative from, I am superhuman and you are not, to, I had a great support system and I executed well when I got my shot.
Exactly.
What about the investors? How do they fix their end of the pipes?
Investors have to stop treating warm introductions as a neutral filter for quality. If you only fund what comes through familiar, comfortable channels, your portfolio is mathematically guaranteed to replicate historical inequalities.
That makes perfect sense.
Investors need to rigorously measure their top-of-funnel bias. Don't just audit who gets the final check, audit who actually gets the first meeting.
Right, who's even getting in the door?
Exactly. Who gets a second meeting? Who gets actionable, specific feedback on their product versus who gets a generic, dismissive comeback when you have more traction?
Because if the algorithm or the associate kills the deal at step one, the exclusion happens way before a term sheet is even drafted.
Exactly. The industry also needs to aggressively expand the types of financial products it offers. Traditional hyper-growth venture capital is not the right tool for every company.
Not everyone needs to be a unicorn.
Right. Many founders would thrive with revenue-based financing, targeted grants, or working capital loans that don't demand a massive 10x exit at the expense of sustainable growth.
And finally, what about the policymakers? The people actually designing the macroeconomic environment.
Policymakers need to stop funding inspiration and start funding infrastructure.
Ooh, say more about that.
We do not need another taxpayer-funded motivational pitch panel or networking mixer. Founders need affordable childcare. They need accessible technical assistance. They need transparent, demystified pathways to government procurement contracts. You cannot substitute a motivational speech for basic economic infrastructure.
I love that. So to synthesize all of this, we simply don't need to manufacture any more motivational heroes.
Right.
The startup ecosystem doesn't need better legends. It needs better plumbing.
Yes.
We need to stop applauding people for surviving a fundamentally broken system. And we need to start fixing the pipes so that the water actually flows to everyone with the seed to plant.
The core takeaway is that the bootstrap myth takes incredibly unequal downside protection wealth, elite networks, and safety nets, and morphs it into an equal moral expectation.
Right.
It demands that everyone walk the exact same financial tightrope while conveniently ignoring that some people have a massive bouncy net underneath them and others have absolutely nothing but concrete.
And retiring this myth isn't about diminishing the value of hard work.
No, not at all. It's about stopping the tragic waste of world-changing talent.
That brings us full circle to those two founders we imagined at the very beginning of our conversation. If we can finally stop forcing founders to bleed just to prove they're morally worthy of funding, it opens up a massive, almost overwhelming question. I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today.
Let's hear it.
How many life-changing innovations, cures for diseases, breakthrough green technologies, brilliant solutions to our deepest social fractures are sitting dormant right now in the minds of people who simply lack that invisible balance sheet to bring them to life? What happens to our society and our future when we finally fix the plumbing and unlock all of that trapped potential? Thank you so much for joining our conversation today and for exploring these ideas with us. We'll catch you next time.